Alright, good afternoon everyone. I'm going to start us off by talking about Chapter 8, running a writing workshop. And the majority of this chapter, Daniel spent talking about how beneficial workshopping can be for any type of writing and any type of content area. My content area personally is English, so I really think that I found this chapter personally helpful. He does give some examples of how you can use it in other contents though. The first page, he really described what a classroom workshop was and how to go about doing it and why we get students to do it. He says, in this setting, kids get writing done right in the classroom where the teacher can observe, provide one-on-one help, and teach in focused, step-by-step manner. I really agree with that. I think that there's a lot of potential with workshops. Not only are students working with each other, but you also have the opportunity to walk around and see how everybody's doing. If you have to work one-on-one with somebody, you can always just, pop a squat right next to them and see what they've got going on. It also helps you see what students are retaining and what students aren't, and maybe how you could potentially help them. So workshopping is valuable for several reasons. The first, it ensures that kids actually get writing done. I know that a lot of times when I've been a substitute teacher in classes, a lot of the times the kids don't actually like to write. They'll pretend that they're writing, they're fairly good at that, but to actually see good, substantial writing getting done is very rare. Two, it lets you instantaneously see what they are succeeding with and what is tripping them up, whether in the writing or in the content you're teaching. So, like I said earlier, you can really get a grasp of what students are really picking it up quickly and what students aren't. And in that setting, you can actually help them in the moment because everybody's individually working on their own thing. Three, it allows you to individualize instruction so you can help explain or teach a lesson to just the students who need it, just when their issue is on their minds. So that's another thing. It opens up the room to possible questions that they might have. You can help them all at the same time while simultaneously not teaching. Well, not teaching, but not lecturing. I think that that's really important because most of the time, kids don't get a lot of one-on-one attention in classrooms, I've noticed. I don't know if it's different now, but when I went to school, we basically just had lectures. Number 4, it's actually much more efficient than whole class instruction. You can decide whether to help one student while the others are working, a small group, or everyone based on what you absorb on the spot. Yeah, that kind of plays into what I was just talking about. If you feel the need to, teach the whole class because none of them have really made substantial progress, you can do so. If you notice that one group is a little bit behind, you can focus on them or individual students. All right. He also talks about the issue that a lot of people have, which is time. So, how much time for in-class writing? Well, time is always a big challenge for teachers. I know that we have to get through a lot of material throughout the school year. I think it's very, very difficult to balance sometimes because I know a lot of teachers personally who really want to get through the material, but they feel rushed because not a lot of the students have gotten it, but they have to move on. So time is a big challenge for teachers. More often than not, we have to choose between taking time to explain topics that students aren't understanding, making us fall further behind in our curriculum schedules. As far as workshopping goes, Daniels points out several times that if you do it correctly, workshopping can actually cut back on this issue. If you give students the tools they need to succeed in a workshop set environment, then they will see results. It's all about balancing your time and how often you choose to workshop because you don't have to workshop every day. Daniel says, how much time for in-class writing? We're not saying that kids are in workshop every day. It's a matter of balance. So whether you take one period for in-class research or you do like 3 half periods devoted to writing up, as long as there's a little bit of time devoted to it, I think that it would be beneficial. He also goes on to say that in one example that he talked about was Nicoletta Antonakos in her history class. She had her students make a detailed analytical outline for their arguments instead of just doing rough drafts. She did this through the art of workshop. So it eliminates the need for a rough draft and gives students a more concrete outline when going into writing papers and such. So how do workshops work then? It's a balance of choice and assignment. Students are given a choice, which is pretty rare, and I think that a lot of times by giving them this choice, it actually helps in their understanding of the topic. It also ensures a variety among the topics and builds engagement. So students are far more motivated when they exercise some control over their work. So by giving students 3 options and then you choose one of their 3 options, that alone could potentially and astronomically increase their interest in the topic and their engagement. So by workshopping the topic that they like, they're going to put more effort into it. And on a personal level, I agree with that. I think that more often than not, when I'm given a choice in my assignments, there is more motivation to do so. I think the biggest question that comes out of writing workshops is how do you incorporate that into science and math? And Daniels does go into a little bit about STEM and how you can incorporate the workshops into them. In Harsha Soni's classroom, she uses writing skills during her lab reports. So basically, instead of having the students go home and write on their own for their labs, they do it in class together. And this, in turn, makes them more analytical, it makes them more focused, their critical thinking is higher for the topic. In fact, plenty of science teachers have no doubt been using workshop for years and just haven't given it any high faculty label. The students just have more focus when you're doing something in the classroom than they would outside of the classroom. That's a given. Dorn Eastwood uses real-life problems instead of abstract exercises to help 7th grade math students. So in math, a writing workshop would probably be word problems. You can have students write their own word problems. You can have them solve each other's word problems. It's just how you go about looking at workshopping and how you think your students will respond to it. So let's go over a little bit what we just talked about. We talked about how workshopping can build engagement in your students and with the material that you're presenting them. By giving them some choice, it gives them the opportunity to feel like they are choosing their own topic and their own education, and it gives them more reason to relate to what they're doing. There's also an individual goal setting, so you can pinpoint certain students that may need individual help more than others, or you can pick out those groups, or you can talk to the class as a whole. It really depends on what you're observing in that moment, and that way you're doing brief, focused teaching. It's also a way of modeling to your students how to critically think and how to read analytically within whatever they're researching at that time. Conferences during the workshops where you get a couple minutes to really talk to your students and see what's going on. That gives them the opportunity to ask any questions that they may have. The only challenges with teacher-student conferences are time, focus, and data. Sometimes it may be difficult to find the time during the class to work individually with each student, because if you have 25 students and you have to meet with each for 3 minutes, that's a lot of time. That's a few periods. So that's one of the main challenges. The next challenge would be focus. Like, what do you focus on, especially if a student has a plethora of writing problems? So if a student is having structural issues writing, then that would be difficult to go into the ideological challenges of the assignment, because if they're not on that level with their writing, then the teacher conference needs to be focused on that. So focus is definitely an issue. The last challenge that you would face during a teacher-student conference is data. How do I keep track of what I've observed and taught during all the various conferences and not get overloaded with record keeping? So if you're having a conference with a student and you're sitting there writing the entire time, you're not giving that student the individual attention they deserve because your head's going to be down the whole time. So I think that when you're having those conferences, how do you possibly record what they're telling you to the extent that you need to after you meet with all of your students? That's another challenge. But the rewards are it helps you see where your students are at so you can get a better understanding of what they're getting out of the topic and what they've retained and how to go forward with them. You get a better understanding of what they need and how you can help them. Daniels also talks about conference records, which I just went over a little bit. He talks about writing folders. So having your students keep written record of all of their writing and having them look back on it over time or to use it for their presentation is greatly beneficial for students because then they have all of this work that they've already done and they can see how they've improved and how they can keep going forward from there. In Nicoletta, in her class, she has her students do a oral presentation of their projects as well, which I think could potentially be really helpful because then they can tie everything all together and it becomes kind of multimodal. I really enjoy that idea. So finally, for Chapter 8, I have just a couple questions. What are some ways to ensure that your students are getting the best out of workshops? And how will you incorporate them into your classroom? So I just want you to think about how you could use workshops and how they would benefit you in your classroom.
Hello, my name is Lorianne, and I will be presenting Chapter 9 from the textbook Content Area Writing by Daniels, Zemmelman, and Steineck. Chapter 9 is titled More Ambitious Writing Projects. This chapter will cover alternatives to the dreaded term paper. This discussion will include multi-genre projects, social action papers, learning fairs, and ISearch papers. According to Daniels et al., these are the big ones, meaty and extensive projects, no bones about it. Let's begin with multi-genre projects. So, what is a multi-genre project anyway? Daniels et al. Explains that a multi-genre project is an alternative to writing one long paper. It is a project where students create a collection of 5, 8, or even 12 different shorter pieces centered around a single important topic. When students are choosing different genres, they can include many different options. Some of them are student-written newspaper articles, diary entries, poems, letters, interviews, song lyrics, greeting cards, speeches, TV shows, and many, many more. A huge list of possibilities can be found on page 207 in Chapter 9. You may be asking yourself, when should you use this type of multi-genre project with your students, and why should you use it? These projects incorporate the same cognitive tasks as a term paper, allow the students to learn about researching, collecting, reporting, and synthesizing information. After they have done all that, they are able to present it through imaginative writing based on fact. This project allows students to be creative, imaginative, and have fun while learning. It is important that we give the students an opportunity to choose their own topics and support them on their journey with that topic. According to Melinda Putz, the author of the Teacher's Guide to the Multi-Genre Research Project, the student selects a topic, does the research as if it were a traditional research paper, collecting information and recording it, synthesizing the information, then presenting it through imaginative writing based on fact. Some of the topics chosen by Melinda's class after careful consideration and research are Barbie dolls, the Manhattan Project, Bill Gates, Ellis Island, Leonardo da Vinci, temporal lobe epilepsy, computer programming, the USS Arizona, Mozart, the Underground Railroad, Italian immigration, Ansel Adams, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, and dioxin poisoning. When Melinda does a multi-genre project with her students, she requires that they choose at least 7 different genres for the project. I have listed several of the possibilities here, but you can find an extensive list on page 207. The chapter provides us with a look at several selections from the multi-genre projects that were done by her students. The first was an imaginary internal memo from Ben and Jerry's corporate headquarters. Another was an interview of a few rebellious newsies in 1918, and the last was a lead story in a newspaper called The Witch Weekly. After the students are done with their projects, they get into groups to discuss their topics and how they interconnect to the other people's topics that are also in the group. The final step is a self-assessment and reflection of the project. The students are presented with several questions to write and reflect upon. And now for our think about. How can you incorporate a multi-genre project into your classroom or learning environment? And also think about which genre listed on page 207 appeals to you the most. The next type of public writing that we will discuss is the social action paper. According to Daniels et al., a social action paper is an activity in which students apply classroom lessons to address real issues in a community, group, or organization. It could be in their town, their community, their school, or their family. For example, at Nathan Hale Middle School in Connecticut, Thomas Disick's students who were studying the Vietnam War discovered that there were no official memorial to the 612 Connecticut residents that gave their lives in that conflict. The kids started to investigate this oversight and committed themselves to making it right. They researched the lost soldiers, tracked down relatives, interviewed them, and gathered information. The students used that information to write biographies of those lost soldiers, and their work has become part of a traveling memorial. For their work on this project, the students and their teacher won the International Reading Association's Presidential Award for Reading and Technology. Now we will discuss learning fairs. According to Daniels et al., a learning fair is a place where students can create a personal inquiry project, including a paper, a display board, a 2-minute presentation, and a handout about a particular subject. Tables can be set up and parents and community members can come out and see what the students have created. When a learning fair works the way it is supposed to, they are wonderful ways for students to create and share their work with an audience larger than their class and teacher. Students will learn about brainstorming, researching, and gathering information, oral and visual communications, and be able to answer questions from an audience on their topics. This will also sharpen their writing skills when they write a paper and create a handout to go with their displays. The last public writing project that we will cover is the ISearch Paper. According to Daniels et al., the ISearch Paper comes the closest to the traditional research paper. There are several differences to note. 1. The topic choice is as unrestricted as possible because one goal of an ISearch paper is for the student to find out about something that truly interests them. Number 2, the ISearch paper is written in the first person. The ISearch paper is a personal story of research and how the writer became interested in that subject, what sources proved the most useful, and what he or she found out in their research. The ISearch can have a chronological narrative structure. When choosing an iSearch topic, you must ask yourself several questions. How did you get interested in the topic? What did you already know about that topic? What questions do you have in regards to the topic? Whom could you interview about this topic? Do you know someone that's in a professional capacity? Maybe your grandmother or father has had that experience. Where else do you think you could get information? Maybe a textbook, the library, movies. How is knowing more about this topic going to help you? The iSearch process includes several components: brainstorming, identifying your audience, a pre-writing exercise, gathering information, drafting, revisions, editing, sharing, and of course, evaluation. As with all of the public writings that we've discussed today, evaluation at the end is key. So make sure that you include some sort of evaluation for your students so that they can look over the process that they have participated in. As you can see, these public writing examples allow for an expanding of our teaching. Including some of these activities in our classroom and other learning environments experience will help us to expand the learning possibilities for our students. Personally, I think that these sound like fun ways to engage with our students, no matter what age or content area we are working within. These projects can help to make our students' imagination and creativity stronger. I hope that you have enjoyed the presentation, and thank you for watching and listening.